You're watching the PoliticIt podcast.
Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. I'm Senator John Johnson, and today we've got Steve Waldrip with us. And Steve, you're the Senior Advisor for Housing
Strategy and Innovation.
Housing Strategy and Innovation. Right. That's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. I didn't pick the title.
Oh.
They didn't ask me. They did the title before they
So I know,
asked me to do it.
you know, when you were in the legislature, you did a lot with affordable housing, right? Whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
So you know, before the show, we were talking just a little bit, and one of the things that struck me that you said was that what was the ratio on the median housing and what it cost, right?
Yeah. Historically in the United States, and this goes back decades and decades and decades, the median home price was 3 times the median income. So that meant if you made $20,000, the median income was 20, median home price was 60. And that persisted in the United States at large measure really up until about 2018. And in 2018, 2019, and then the pandemic, we blew that out of the water, and now we're close to 6 times the median wage to the median home price.
So if you make $20,000, then that's
$120,000. Yeah, so we've cut affordability in half. And that's largely due to supply and demand. We just don't have enough places for people to live.
And that's particular. Now you said something, you compared our housing prices in Utah to actually kind of shocking numbers in a way, right?
Yeah, depending on which measure you look at, and there's all kinds of measures, but if you're looking at just median income to median home price, we're right in 3rd place, right behind California and Hawaii. Hawaii is by far the biggest, California is by far 2nd. We're in 3rd place, and we jockey with a few other states between kind of 3rd and 6th, at nearly 6 times the median home price. We got up to 6.3, and I think we're down.
And part of that is this big migration into Utah, right? For one, and you know, we have a limited supply.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that our major problem, really, supply issues, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things going on, right? I mean, it's not. If there was one silver bullet that we just shoot, you know, we wouldn't be talking today. I wouldn't even have a job. I'd be doing something else. But supply really is the constraint that we're looking at. And in Utah particularly, we have 85-90% of our population living on 1% of our land. And so you've got the mountains on one side and Salt Lake and Utah Lake on the other, and we're squeezing everybody into that chute. And we're now busting out at the tops and bottoms and the sides. But we really have that constraint of land. So land prices have gone up dramatically. And as a result,
that's one of the big
housing
drivers
prices
then,
have gone up. And yeah, if you have to pay $20,000 for a lot, you can build this price of a home. If you have to pay $80,000 for a lot, you have to build a more expensive home to make it work.
As we push up against the mountains, not only is the property more valuable, but it costs more to build.
Yeah, absolutely.
On those parcels, right?
Yeah. And there's one other really interesting thing that's happening, something I hadn't really considered, but was brought up by a demographer in a conference I was just at a couple weeks ago. Our average house size, and we all know this, our average house size is shrinking, right? We used to, you know, Utah used to have, 5 people per household. And we're now down a little above 3, and we're projected to go down, Salt Lake right now, I think 2.3. And we're mirroring the nation in smaller household sizes. So if our population stays the same and our household size shrinks, we need more houses for the same number of people. And so that's another compounding factor in our shortfall, in our supply shortfall, is not only are we bringing people in, as you mentioned, from out of state, we keep having babies, which is good, we need it, but then we're shrinking our household size. So as a natural result, we need more places for people to live, and we're not producing.
So what are some of the solutions that you guys have come up with to help with that?
Yeah, it's really tricky because traditionally, and again, this is really pre-2018, government was only involved in very low income housing, and by necessity, right? You can't build subsidized housing without a subsidy. And for people of low income, it doesn't pencil. You cannot get a developer to come in and build a project at a loss. So it requires government intervention. So we have federal tax credits, we have state tax credits. They operate in that kind of income range for people making this much money. Because of what's happened, we're now dealing with this income range above that, where we have to think about creative solutions. And it's tricky because we don't have enough tax money to subsidize our way out of this. We cannot subsidize the general marketplace. We can't even afford to subsidize what we're already subsidizing. And we're not producing enough subsidy as it is. So our low-income housing is tremendously thin. And as we now create this other need, we're going, okay, so we have to really focus on market-based solutions that are going to put private money to work in more efficient ways in our marketplace, because we cannot tax and spend our way out of this deal. This is a billions of dollar problem in Utah. We'll never get out of it. So we're really looking at those market-based drivers and what can we do to help create a lane for developers and builders and cities to work together to create more supply. And it's challenging.
And so let's talk a little bit about some of these projects that you've been working on, because I think some of them are quite innovative. So let's go into some of those.
Yeah. So in 2024, the legislature, thank you, created a $300 million fund using essentially reserve transportation infrastructure fund money, put $300 million aside and made it available for developers and, well, for lenders to come in and borrow for their developer partners at a below market interest rate and use that to incentivize the creation of starter homes. So in order to access that money, they had to build 60% of what they were building as a starter home below 450, 400,000, owner occupied. And in order to do that, the cities had to grant more density. So it was kind of an everybody in the middle kind of a thing. And it's really tough to do that, particularly in high growth areas where we have a lot of fatigue about growth. There's been a lot of pushback on that notion that we need more small starter homes because those areas feel like they've already done their part. And so this year in the 2025 session, again, thanks to the legislature, we allowed Utah Housing Corp to be a depository for that $300 million fund and created a condo-specific program through Utah Housing, where we are making available also surplus UDOT parcels, which are typically right on transportation corridors. They're near transit, they're near freeways, they're places where you're going to want to have some density, and density is not going to be controversial. So we're making that land available essentially at the dirt price for developers to come in, take advantage of that land price, bid for a project on those parcels that's funded by Utah Housing Corp. So UHC does the lending on the program. The developers come in and they have to bid out the entire project with a fixed sales price. So they don't have an inclination or the ability to raise the price based on market. We want that price to be below market. And so by allowing the land to come in at below market cost, by creating some guarantees around that construction process, requiring the developer to come in up front with their revenue, so that's a part of that initial pro forma. And if there's any cost savings, they don't go to the developer, they flow through to the end user. And so we're anticipating that this program will produce condos across the state. We're hoping between $25,000 and $50,000 under market. Kind of depends on the area. But starter condos have not been produced in any great number in our state or the country for the last 20 years, and there's a few reasons.
So if people buy into those, what if they just buy them and then flip them?
We'll have restrictions on the time they can flip them and on the amount of money they can make on a flip. There's a couple of ways to do that. One way is to tie back the purchase price to their sales price. So let's say they buy it at 75% of market, then they can sell it when they sell it at 75% of market. So it stays below market. They get the full benefit of their bargain. They're growing with the market for the money that they've invested and they've purchased it for, but they don't get the windfall. That windfall stays locked up. There's other ways to do that.
The next person coming in can...
The next person coming in gets the same deal. It's still 25% below market in that case, and the person after that gets it at 25% below market. So it stays affordable within the marketplace and continues, but it doesn't hamper those individuals from realizing the value that they have invested in that home.
Well, we're going to take a break and we'll come right back.
Tired of media bias? Frustrated by political noise? PoliticIt.com cuts through the clutter, giving you real facts, clear analysis, and unbiased insight on the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay empowered. Whether it's elections, policy changes, or breaking news, we've got you covered. No spin, no agendas, just truth you can trust. Visit PoliticIt.com today, because informed citizens shape the future. PoliticIt.com, where politics meets clarity.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. Again, we're talking with Steve Waldrip, a senior advisor to the governor. And, you know, it's interesting. During the break, we talked a little bit about this idea of NIMBYism. Can you explain that concept? And let's talk a little bit about why that's causing issues with housing affordability.
Yeah, great question. So NIMBY is not in my backyard. It's the acronym. And it's kind of a pejorative, right? It's people, you know, there's also CAVE, Citizens Against Virtually Everything. I mean, there's some acronyms out there that describe this feeling that we are who we are. We're here now. We don't want change. We don't want anybody else to get what we've gotten. And anything that threatens what we think we have, we can control and dictate. And there's kind of this misconception out there, and we've really allowed it to grow. When you buy a piece of property, you buy a certain amount of rights. And in the law, they call it the bundle of sticks. You get your bundle of sticks when you buy a property. You have the right to be left alone. You have the right to occupy. You have these things that you have. Now, generally speaking, we think our bundle of sticks is about this big. We also own our view, so no one can block our view. We own the road out front of our house. No one can do something on that road that we don't like. We own the sidewalk. We own the school density. We own the traffic. We own who gets to live where we want them to live, how big their houses are. I mean, so this notion of what we own has really shifted over the last probably 20 or 30 years to a really expansive view of what property owners feel like they can control beyond the borders of their own property. It used to be, hey, just leave me alone, and,
that's
what I get.
This is my property.
Now
don't
it's
touch it.
This is my property, and I get to dictate that. And it's not, I mean, it's understandable, right? We want to have great communities, especially when you've invested in a community, you've gone in and you've put your money and your time and your effort, and you volunteered, and you go to the schools and you go to the churches and you volunteer civically and you're on the planning commission. You want to protect the character and nature of that. So totally understandable, human nature. But what it sets up is, I think the governor calls it false choices, where we either do nothing or we grow and we ruin everything. And that's the real problem, is that we've lost that ability to have people walk together in the middle and say, okay, what can we do that's really positive for the community? How does this really impact us? Is this really as scary as we think it is? But that fear is really driving the housing narrative right now.
Yeah, and that makes it hard, because I think one of the major difficulties most people have is, they said, my own kids can't afford to live
That's right.
in Utah. They need to move away. And that's one side of it, right?
Yeah.
But then there's the other group that are saying, yes, but I don't want your kids in my backyard, right?
Well, and even there's some people say, I don't want my kids in my backyard. I want them to live over there, not here. And again, there's a lot of tension around that notion, because the worst thing, people are worried about ruining our way of life, our culture, who we are, what's created us. And that's a real concern. And the quickest way to do that is not allowing more growth and allowing our kids to stay here. It's not growing and forcing our kids to leave. We're sending our kids to Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Ohio. We're sending them to places where housing is affordable, because they're saying, hey, I've got to start my American dream and I can't do it here, so I'm leaving. And we get about a quarter of them back, but we've lost 75% of what makes us who we are. And it's not by choice, it's because they feel forced to make that change.
So how did you get involved with this? I know you're a lawyer by training, right?
Right.
And you spent quite a while in the legislature, right?
Yeah, so I went to law school here at the U. I did my undergrad at BYU, then I went to law school at the U. So everybody at either school hates me for going to the other one. No one likes me because I went there.
And those are the two schools that you shouldn't cross.
Yeah, no, you don't cross-pollinate those two. That's like, I don't know what that is, but it's not pretty. Then I got a master's in tax law, practiced tax law after these 4 years of graduate work for 9 months. Decided I wasn't smart enough to do that work for the rest of my life. Got a job with the Boyer Company, did development with them for about 14 years. Did some consulting work after that, kind of dedicated that portion of my life. There's sort of the next portion to seeing if I could make the world a little better for me having been here. Served on United Way Board and some other boards, and then that led to the legislature where I spent time.
How long were you in the legislature?
I was in for 4 years, so 2 terms in the House.
Terms.
And at that time, I was also co-founding a startup social benefit fund called Rocky Mountain Homes Fund, which we initially started with teachers and helping teachers get into home ownership, where, again, this is what we've lost, right? We've lost the ability for a teacher and a firefighter and a police officer to buy a home. And so this program creates that opportunity for them. So I helped found that. That got me into housing a lot more deeply than when I was in the legislature.
And that's probably what led the governor to you, right?
Yeah, well, and then in the legislature, I was on the Commission for Housing Affordability, so that became my thing. And I am very passionate about what housing ownership means for our country and for our society. If right now, Utah is 70% homeowners. 70% of the people live here own their homes. Nationally, 65%. So we know what that produces, and it produces what we have now, which is really great. Started post-World War II, we're kind of riding the wave of all that wealth that was generated from ownership, because we built things that people could afford post-war. We built what most people, now at our age and older, grew up in, which was a 12 to 1,400 square foot home. And they survived just fine. But our average home size now is about 2,800 square feet. And so not only have our costs gone up, but our size has increased as well.
But yet our household sizes are...
And our household sizes are shrinking. So we're sort of schizophrenic in how we, live. But the challenge is, if we don't generate opportunities for our kids and grandkids to get into ownership young and build that equity and build wealth that allows them to be independent, gives them opportunities for education, for business startups, all of those things that come with the wealth generation from property ownership. Right now, as we sit today, if you're a renter in the state of Utah, only 7% of you can afford the median priced home in Utah. And so if you extrapolate that out and say, geez, maybe we get to 25%.
They don't get in the market, then.
Yeah, and maybe it's, you go down from the median priced home to something 400,000, and you have this now 25% home ownership by generation. 40, 50 years from now, when that cohort begins to retire, you now have 75% of the people that have not built wealth in the same way that our generations have built wealth, where we have 70% ownership. And we can barely afford the subsidies now that we have to do to take care of people who can't take care of themselves. And it's one of our cultural things. We care for those who are less fortunate among us. But when we create too big of a burden, that upends and we're in serious trouble.
Right. Well, we're about out of time, but in concluding, what are some of the things that people should know about what the governor's trying to achieve in this whole thing, and what your goals are?
Yeah, well, my goals are my boss's goals, right? He tells me what to do. Fortunately, we align, so I don't have to get angry ever. I'm just always happy about it. But our goals really center around home ownership. We need more of everything. We need more on the low end. We need more on the high end. We need more in the middle. The focus, though, is on starter homes, on first homes for young couples and people coming into the market so that they can get started. If we don't produce that, the median wealth of a renter in the United States, 2022 numbers, $10,400. That's the median net worth of renters. The median net worth of homeowners, that same time period, $396,200. That gap is what we have to solve for. We have to create the opportunity so that this younger generation can create the wealth that we've been able to create and that makes us who we are. Without that, we are a different society. Without the anchor that home ownership is in our communities, without the engagement that produces, without all of the stuff that comes along with that, stable ownership, stable housing is critical to so many things in our world. And so that really is the focus of the governor. We're working closely with the legislature to create tools. There's a lot of tension between what the state should say needs to be done in Utah and what the cities should be able to limit or not do. And that's really where the battle lines are drawn right now, is between the tension between, how much should the state weigh in on what local communities need to do and should do and can't say no to. And there's a lot of discussion around that. And that's really what we're talking about now.
That's great. Steve, thanks for coming in. I think it's important for people to realize of what you guys are actually trying to do. And I think when people better understand that, they feel better about it, because let's face it, all of us want our kids to be able to have the kind of life that we had.
Yeah,
right?
And that's the focus. Our kids and grandkids need to have that opportunity. We're not building this for people from California. We're building it so that our kids and grandkids can have the opportunities that we've had, and they can stay here and continue with all of the things that we've created. I mean, Utah's amazing.
Yeah.
And we're going to get more and more attractive over the next several years as the rest of the world kind of continues to degenerate. I mean, you think about San Francisco, we're taking refugees from San Francisco and Chicago and New York and now LA, and they're all coming here because we have a great thing.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks. Steve Waldrip. We'll see you guys next week.